Subtract the 4, divide through by 6, square root of 11, carry the 1. Oh, sorry, don't mind me. Just trying to work out how many people are actually likely to find their way to this video, and based on my previous experiences, it's probably not all that many of you. I find it tough and it feels inauthentic to be like, hi there guys, when actually it'd be probably more appropriate to say, hi there guy, reflective of the one person that is actually watching. Anyway, that's enough of my self-pity. Today I'd like to talk to you all about something I find really interesting because it combines loads of things: psychology, finance, economics, marketing, loads of stuff that I'm really interested in. And that is my relationship with online shopping, particularly with Amazon, since the start of the pandemic back in March 2020. Now, I don't think it's any great secret that Amazon's done unbelievably well since the start of the pandemic. The share price is up 75% in the 10 months, and they've had to take on board an extra 100,000 employees in order to keep up with the skyrocketing demand. Can't be letting people down with those next day deliveries. I also don't think you need to be as smart as Jeff Bezos to understand why the business has done so well during this time. I think most of us would be perfectly comfortable in saying, well, online shopping's gone through the roof because people can't get out of their houses anymore and physical shops are shut. And this is undoubtedly the key factor. But what I'd like to do today is dig a little bit deeper into some of the psychological nuance around this, and then reflect on my 2020 Amazon spending through this lens. And if you're able to bear with me, I'm hoping to be able to neatly tie all these sort of different strands of thoughts together by the end of the video. So, first things first, other than the fact physical shops are now shut, what else has changed during the pandemic that has had a knock-on impact to everyone's spending habits? And I think there are probably two key things that people will no doubt be aware of, but possibly on a slightly more subconscious level than the impact of shops being shut. The first is people simply spending more time on their computers. Not only has the time spent in physical shops dropped off, but this has actually been replaced by people spending more time in virtual stores. So almost by the law of averages, I think that's the right phrase, the more time you spend scrolling online, the greater the chance that something will catch your eye. It's a little bit like if you were to aimlessly wander around a huge department store for long enough, you'd probably in the end find something that you wanted to take home with you. That said, I don't think it's as simple a relationship as an increase in the time spent browsing on the computer leading to a proportionate increase in the amount of online shopping done. Computers and cookies are so clever these days that we're being targeted with personalised ads and suggested items in a way like never before, really. And importantly, in a way that would simply be impossible to do on the high street. When you stop to think about it, it's a little bit like if you were to spend 5 or 10 minutes looking at some sunglasses in House of Fraser, only to decide that actually you're not going to go ahead and buy them. And then you leave the shop, walk down the street and go into John Lewis. It's the equivalent of the sales assistant in John Lewis knowing that you're sort of already umming and ahhing as to whether you're going to go ahead and purchase some glasses, and if they knew that, they could apply the right sort of pressure or advice accordingly. And on top of the advantage that companies have through having this improved quality of data on all of us, throughout the pandemic, loads of places have been offering huge discounts, really, in an attempt to make sure that they keep their sales up through a fear of the lost footfall on the high street. And this side of things comes back to the age-old question that I do think about quite a lot, which is if something that used to cost £100 is now on offer down to 75, have I then spent £75 or saved 25 quid? And I'm sure the actual answer is it depends if you were going to buy it anyway. I just don't think a lot of the time people accurately and honestly know the answer to that question, so it's difficult to tell. There is yet another knock-on impact of spending more time in front of your computer screen, and certainly one that's impacted me, and that is the increased amount of time spent on YouTube, specifically watching tech type reviews of products, and actually sort of building up a demand for something that previously I didn't even know I wanted. And I think all of these factors are things that make it easier on a day-to-day basis to part with your cash. and are certainly all things to be actively aware of rather than just sleepwalking into your next purchase. So in addition to everything I've just said, I think the second key driver behind the boom in online shopping is actually a psychological one. For a range of different reasons, loads of people are going through a pretty tough time mentally at the moment. And I think this is where the concept of retail therapy comes in. Studies have shown that when we shop, whether that be in person or online, we experience a rush of dopamine, one of the feel-good hormones. Interestingly, a similar study also found that shopping whilst already in a bad mood can increase the impulsivity with which people are likely to make purchases. And as such, shopping can certainly boost a low mood, basically because consciously or subconsciously you're trying to cheer yourself up in any way you can find. And in a similar vein, shopping has been certainly shown as a way for people to cope with high levels of stress. In fact, high levels of distress have been linked with higher purchase intentions. So when all of this is considered and you're looking at something online and with one click of a button it could be turning up at your front door tomorrow, it can be really difficult to resist. Now, I'm certainly not a conspiracy theorist who thinks that these big companies have got way too much data on us. I'm not anti-capitalist. I don't think people are trying to take advantage of the public in vulnerable mental states. That said, on an individual basis, I do think it's everyone's responsibility to stay really deliberate in their own buying habits and make sure that these habits are well balanced against their own underlying budget. So with all of that preamble in mind, I've decided to take a look back at my Amazon spending for the last 10 months. I was keen to see if I was falling into any of these traps, because I think until you sit down and have a little think about it, it's not necessarily something that you're going to be acutely aware of on a day-to-day basis. So these numbers don't include a lot of non-Amazon spending that I've done throughout the course of the year, which has certainly taken place. To give an idea, I've recently bought this new camera to film these videos. I bought a new iPhone last summer. I've bought quite a few clothes throughout the course of the year, and some decent Christmas presents as well. So I've certainly been spending elsewhere, but I'd like to think that I can justify to myself that each of those purchases was relatively considered, relatively deliberate, and that it's my Amazon spending where it's really relevant for me to focus this analysis. So here we go. In the last 10 months, give or take 300 days, I have made 93 Amazon orders with an average value of £19 each, which gives a total spend of £1,780. Just in the interest of transparency, I've actually excluded one order from those numbers, which was a £200 computer monitor that I bought on Amazon last summer, but I've excluded that because it's something that work paid for through expenses in the end. Just to run through some of those purchases in a little bit more detail, the single most expensive item was a pair of AirPods that I bought last March. They were £129, and the cheapest was 85p spent on some cotton buds to clean your ears. I spent £6 on a nose hair trimmer, £39 on some scented candles, which you can probably see behind me, £14 on some Olbas what else? £10 on some spray paint for when we had a little makeshift badminton court set up outside. So a huge mix of like random things really. But the question I'm really trying to answer here is, are these numbers excessive and do they shock me? So I've averaged a £19 order every 3.2 days for the last 10 months. Some of this stuff being necessities like hay fever tablets, others far from necessities like a £42 electric back and shoulder massager. But I think my conclusion, if I'm being really honest with myself, is that these numbers aren't actually too bad. What I would be really interested to hear is how anyone else compares with this, both in terms of number of orders placed and total order value. Sitting here in isolation, it's difficult to really compare and get an understanding of whether this is over the top or actually pretty prudent. And I think the reason I'm not too concerned with all this is that despite 93 orders sounding high, every 3.2 days is a lot, but an average order value of 19 doesn't seem too bad to me. And to be honest, just looking at it now, I've actually bought quite a lot of relatively cheap stuff. The average is certainly boosted up by a few larger one-offs, like some AirPods, some of the Christmas presents I bought, a printer that was over £100. So to wrap up, I think the crux of the reason why I think these numbers are broadly acceptable is that I know I'm not immune to the psychological and screen time factors that we talked about earlier. So what I think I've done is find a balance whereby I can scratch that itch of knowing that a delivery is turning up at the door later in the day, and subconsciously taking that little hit of dopamine. Importantly, without spending excessive amounts on a large number of really expensive things. But what I would say is, even if I'm right in saying that I've managed to find this balance, it's certainly been more through luck rather than judgment. And going forward, I'm certainly going to be far more aware of the importance of remaining deliberate with each and every purchase I make, and having one eye on the fact that there are these sort of different factors at play out there, and make sure that they aren't driving your decision making if you don't want them to. And I think that is the bottom line, really, making sure that you're fully aware of everything that's going on and not just sleepwalking from one purchase to another with no concept of the financial consequences. So I hope you found that vaguely interesting and useful. Like I say, it'd be really good to hear how anyone compares on both a quantity of orders and a value of orders perspective. Let me know down in the comments and I will certainly get back to you. But other than that, that's all from me today, guys. Look forward to seeing you in the next video. All the best and stay safe. Bye bye.